open up Architectural Board of Review meeting for June 9th, 2025. We'll start with roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll begin with Chair Anderson.
Here.
Vice Chair Whalen.
Here.
Board Member Anderson.
Here.
Board Member Noon.
Here.
Board Member Six.
Here.
And Board Member Soffren.
Here.
We have quorum. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to general business. Item A, public comment. Any member of the public may address the board for up to 2 minutes on any subject within its jurisdiction that is not on today's agenda.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. At this time, I do not have any speaker slips for in-person public comment. For general public comment, if anyone in the room would like to speak on the item, they can come up to the podium now. But I'm not seeing any movement. We don't have any participants online, but I will acknowledge that we received written correspondence from Mark Pratt and give it back to you.
Thank you. We will close public comment and move on to the approval of the minutes for the meeting on May 12th. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, let's take a vote.
Thank you. I'll begin with Chair Anderson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen.
Yes.
Board Member Anderson.
Yes.
Board Member Noon.
Yes.
Board Member Six.
Yes.
And Board Member Soffren.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes for the consent meeting on May 12th. I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
Okay, let's take a vote.
Thank you. I'll begin with Chair Anderson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen.
Yes.
Board Member Anderson.
Yes.
Board Member Noon.
Yes.
Board Member Six.
Yes.
And Board Member Soffren.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, and then item D, ratification of action taken on consent calendars of May 19th, June 2nd, and June 9th.
So the items listed on the agenda, 920 Summit Road, Montecito Club, was there for project design approval and final approval. And that was made, so project design and final approval with findings were made on the consent calendar for May 19th. The consent calendar for June 2nd, the first item on that one was 1609 San Pasqual Street. It was a concept review, so it was continued indefinitely to consent. And then item 2 that day was project design and final approval for 513 Garden Street. And then that received project design approval and final approval with associated findings. And then today we had 3102 State Street, which is a tree removal application that received project design and final approval. And then 210 Stearns Wharf, which was here for concept review, was continued indefinitely back to consent with some findings about some trellis material stuff, and that's about it.
Chair Anderson,
Yes.
a question for staff, please, on the June 2nd item for 513 Garden Street. Was there any deep discussion about using artificial turf as a siding material? I mean, what was the nature of the discussion? Perhaps those board members who were there, was that the coalition of Andersons who were there?
Yes. Both of us and Board Member Black were there, and there was quite a discussion. Do you want to recap?
Well, yeah, there was some amount of discussion, and I spoke against it, saying I felt it didn't embody, in the context of Santa Barbara, with an emphasis on beauty, that I didn't feel it was a beautiful material or facade, and the rendition of that particular material didn't express qualities of beauty. Not that the material itself was problematic, but that it was just so much of a one-liner and so homogeneous. And you know, why we asked some questions about why we couldn't maybe use a real planting. Talked about nature and ephemerality of nature, and how this astroturf material kind of doesn't really tell that story at all. So that was my perspective. Board Member Black and Board Member Anderson, or Chair Anderson, you could.
Yeah, so I think Board Member Anderson made a lot of good points, and Board Member Black and I came to the conclusion that it wasn't that visible from the street, and that if it had been more visible and a street presence, then it would not have been acceptable. But since it was an interior change, we felt that it would be okay.
Understandable. Thank you for those comments. Was there any justification on the part of the proponent for the use of were they looking for a green wall? Was it just too darn hot with that metal, or what drove that design decision?
Yeah, so it was originally approved with plaster. They had a lot of psychological reasons why they wanted it to go green. And the reason for not using real plant material was mainly maintenance.
Right. That was very helpful. Thank you. I have a feeling that this may come up again, which is why I wanted to go into some discussion
Yeah.
for the members of the board.
Well, that was one of the comments that Board Member Black added at the end was, I think he said, I hope this doesn't set a precedent or something like that, right? And so, yeah, that definitely was I think a concern.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my concern was more practicality. Would it heat the building up, that kind of thing. Yeah, it was a hard
Good.
decision.
Well, your justification about it having no visual impact from the major public areas, I think is the key one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other discussions? We're looking to ratify these minutes or these motions. Do we have a motion to ratify?
I so move to ratify.
Second.
Okay, let's take a vote.
Thank you. I'll begin with Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
I'm going to abstain due to absence on the 9th of June.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Noon,
Yes.
Board Member Six,
Yes.
and Board Member Sovereign.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to item E, any announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals?
No announcements, or requests, or continuances, et cetera. Yeah, nothing
Did
from
we
staff.
get a date on the appeal for Gutierrez, or not Gutierrez,
June 12th.
Milpas? They did give it? Okay.
418 North Milpas, I think that date just changed today.
Kathy emailed me.
Yeah, I want to say now it's August 12th.
That's what I'm saying, August 12th.
Yeah, let me just double check. Yeah, so they moved the appeal date for 418 North Milpas to August 12th.
Okay, thank you. And any subcommittee reports? Nope. All right. Let's move on to item 1. This is a referral from consent for project design approval and final approval, 3055 De La Vina Street. Proposal to convert the existing hotel to permanent supportive housing pursuant of Assembly Bill 2162 and the state's density bonus program. The development is comprised of 32 studio units and one bedroom manager's unit. The project includes renovating the hotel office into a community room and office for supportive services, permitting a residential laundry room, hardscape, and landscape improvements throughout the site, including common outdoor gathering areas, and restriping the parking lot to provide 15 vehicle spaces. Project qualifies for an exemption from further environmental review under Section 15301 of the California Environmental Quality Act. Project design approval and final approval requested. It requires compliance with the project compatibility findings and urban design guidelines, last reviewed by consent on May 12th, 2025. I do have the minutes from the meeting on the original meeting. I don't remember what date that was.
I can pull up the minutes, and then staff has some brief comments too. So this is a
Okay.
100% affordable housing project. It was last heard a month ago, give or take. And The reason it's here today is there was a split vote on consent, and so can you go back to the other one? A split vote doesn't constitute a vote at that hearing, so it needed to be referred to full board today. So it's here for project design and final approval, and that's what we're hoping to see today. So
Okay, so I'm going to read the minutes that we looked at for that consent meeting. So the board appreciates the adaptive reuse of the existing building and Spanish colonial style design. The board finds the project an acceptable and supportable redevelopment project. The board can find preliminary project compatibility findings and consistency with the urban design guidelines and Upper State Street design guidelines. The board complements the radical reduction of asphalt and increase of landscape. Provide the appropriate following details: eave, balcony, awning, chimney, door, and window and jamb head and sill. Lighting specifications and locations, plantings and irrigation plans. All details should reflect the traditional Spanish colonial architectural style. The board encourages additional bike parking as feasible. So welcome back. You'll have 15 minutes. Maybe walk us through what you walked us through at consent and those changes. So, thank you.
Just going to kick this off. Dale Azam with the Housing Authority. Nice to see you all again. As Mr. Russell said, this project is an affordable housing project. The aim here is to provide housing for 32 extremely low-income residents. As he also mentioned, it's an adaptive reuse project, so we're converting a hotel into 32 studio units and then one bedroom manager apartment. Originally, to be honest, we conceived this as a very simple project where we would do a modest rehabilitation. We would take the motel, we would add kitchenettes, remove the pool, and house 32 individuals. It's really grown, and it's grown for a number of reasons, including, decisions we made ourselves. We wanted to improve the aesthetics for the neighborhood, and the neighbors came out, and we understood that was very important to them. So all of that's great. When we're done, we want a great environment for the residents, for the neighbors, and for the city, something that everyone can be proud of. But I want to just remind everyone that this is affordable housing. The budget's already grown quite substantially, and I would just respectfully ask that you keep that in mind as you go through your deliberations. But with that, I will turn it over to the experts.
Hello, I'm Katie Moses, architect working on the project, and we have Katie.
Katie Klein, landscape architect.
So we have come back with kind of the detailing that was requested from their initial meeting. I start with the just kind of overview of site plan. We've got, I think most of you are familiar with the site, but existing kind of hotel lobby that we're converting for community use, and two residential two-story buildings that are kind of built into a hillside. So the elevations, we've kind of moved into our construction documents phase, but have worked out some detailing for dormer vent or awning overhangs. We've added this kind of little buttress, detailed this kind of tower entry off of San Marcan, which there's kind of an existing funky makeshift roof over this area. I think with the stair and everything, I think it needed a roof, but kind of married the two roofs as they intersect. We've also worked out detailing with the existing balcony and guardrails, the stair. And kind of proportions for the new entry and chimney logistics with the contractor and things. So those have been kind of worked out. For the most part, lighting, we're proposing what's there to stay existing. They're kind of nondescript little fixtures that are in front of each unit, kind of paired with the two doors. We are proposing 2 Steve Handelman fixtures at the community room entry. And some people in our office were commenting on this existing chimney with the signage, so I think just keeping it simple, or removing kind of the top portion where it starts to splay outward and working that. This tower entry, a couple of plaster corbels and a vent, which we have detailed, but working to kind of keep some of the detailing working with what we've worked out with what is existing on the building. When we get to the details, we only are replacing about 2 kind of unit entry doors and a laundry door and community center doors. And so we wanted to keep that consistent with the detailing that's existing. So it's not recessed or anything. We are providing, proposing a little eyebrow detail with the new finish stucco over a few windows, and also a sill trim detail on some of the windows on the elevations as shown. This is kind of our tile awning over, I think we have 3 of these. There's awning over the community center entrance. And then we've detailed out kind of the balcony post connection with the fascia on that. Did kind of a fatter steel tube guardrail detail connecting to the post and a corbel above. The eave, we've kind of maintained what's there. It's a soffitted existing eave, replacing or keeping the or removing the fascia, replacing it with cement, fiber cement fascia. There's, I think, for long-term durability and painting, but we've provided a few locations with this corbel to kind of tie it in. The dormer vent, there's some existing little pop-up vents on the roof, so there's 3 of them that we've detailed out here. The Samarkand entry tower has a little vent detail that we've shown there. And got the proportions of the buttress and arches kind of shown. Kind of the typical eave for the tower, kind of to match with or to go along with what we're doing. Typical 2-piece clay tile roof, chimney profile, and I think that's about it for our side. I will let Katie jump to landscape.
Sure, I can just quickly go through all the sheets and you can see our final plan set.
Oops. Sorry.
Apologies, the computer sometimes acts up.
Sorry. Do you want
So-
planting plan or?
We can just start maybe at the beginning and I'll just go through.
Yeah, point out the bicycle.
Oops, sorry.
You can start there. That's
Okay.
good. So here's our hardscape plan, construction plan. Bicycle parking, we were able to add 4 more spots. Previously, we had 8. Now we have 12. Nothing significantly changed here. We just have provided details for all the hardscape and amenities. If you want to go to the next sheet, just our details: handrail, stairs, wall. Go to the next sheet. Fencing, pergola, details. Go to the next one. Our furnishings specs, that we're doing the hoop rack in black. Go to the next sheet. Keep going. Here are irrigation plans. Pretty straightforward. We are screening the backflow with the Cape brush in the front, so that will sufficiently block the irrigation backflow, and any other utilities you can't really see. We're making sure that they're screened. Go to the next sheet. Keep going. Those are irrigation details. And then our planting plan. Trees, similar as we had before. We're introducing a significant amount of trees. If you go to the bottom right, we have our tree stats.
Sorry. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. And we had also done, Will, an elevation. Do you happen to have that?
Is that tacked on to the end of this? I think that's.
Okay, great.
If not,
Here it is, actually.
Yeah.
So I think
Just
this
stay here.
kind of speaks more to our to the planting. So new trees through the elevations, planting, screening, and it's all low water Santa Barbara style plants. You know, agaves, senecio, little ollie, birds of paradise, very Spanish, with jacarandas. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. We will open up public comment for item 1.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. At this time, I do not have any speaker slips for in-person public comment, though I do want to just remind the audience, if anyone is here to speak on any other items, they can fill out a speaker slip on that side of the room and bring one up to me at any time. But moving on, for this item, we do still have one participant online. If they would like to speak on this item, they can raise their hand now. I'm not seeing any raised hands, and we didn't receive any written correspondence on this, so I'm going to give it back to you.
Okay, thanks. We'll close public comment and go to questions from the board. Board Member 6.
No questions.
Vice Chair Whalen.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. One question for Mr. Azam. This is kind of late in the game, but in your programming, was there ever any consideration for private raised gardens for these long-term residents? I know that gardening can be quite therapeutic. There isn't a lot of room on the site, and there are associated problems with doing that, but I'd be interested for the public record in hearing the Housing Authority's point of view.
We did not consider it on this one that I recall. We do have a few properties that have that kind of setup, and I agree with you that they can be good. Sometimes it can be hard to manage and they fall into sort of disrepair. But for whatever reason, we didn't give that a lot of thought on this site.
Thank you.
I will say we have orange trees, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Board Member Noon.
I just wanted to ask, what was the issue of the split decision?
Well, there were 2 of us there, and one thought that the detailing was appropriate, and one did not.
Okay. I did want to ask, you mentioned you are doing a new light fixture. I didn't see that in the set. Do you have any detail on that?
I think it's a Steve Hanneman Luciano fixture. I don't know if we made it in this set, but that's our intent.
Okay, that's it.
Board Member Sofferin?
No questions.
Board Member Anderson?
So have the drawings changed at all since we saw them at consent?
No, not on our end.
This is still the same, okay. That's my only question.
Okay. I have no questions, so we can go into comments. They're here for project design and final approval. So Board Member Six?
Yes, I think this is ready for project design approval and final approval. Just a couple minor things that I think you should consider. I think the clay tile flues in the dormer vents are too large and overpowering the front of that, and perhaps the use of the tower vent instead if it's deeply recessed. I don't know what your free area requirements are, but it's a little crowded and heavy there, but a minor non-critical thing. And another minor non-critical thing is that the pergola in the yard could be more elegant with more overhangs to all the various primary, secondary, and tertiary layers, and a decorative beam cut at the primary. Those are my comments.
Vice Chair Whalen?
Well, I want to commend the proponents and the designers for public housing. This exemplifies a high level of and sophistication of the details delineating Spanish colonial revival that enhanced that particular neighborhood and that part of town. Thank you.
Board Member Noon?
I agree with previous comments, and I think it's ready for both PDA and final. I would comment just to confirm the light fixture is, everything that needs to be.
Okay, yes.
I don't know if that needs to be a condition. I assume that will get covered.
We can do that. Board Member Sofferin?
Same.
Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, I don't think this represents a Spanish colonial style. If you look at the George Washington Smith projects, in this idea of an Andalusian farmhouse, it potentially could be that with some of the things like the recessed window detail with the plaster returning in. Also the eave detail, I think if the existing structure can't be exposed, then the eave should just be cropped back. That is something that is visible in some of the George Washington Smith homes. I think there's a busyness to the dormer vents, and that the presence of the dormer vents is kind of out of place in a way on the elevation and distracting to look at. And that I think if the elevations were simplified a little bit more, it would be a little bit easier on the eye. The chimney, I think, actually looks a little bit closer to the direction I think that this should go in. It looks a lot simpler, and yeah, the landscape looks good, I think. So those are my comments.
Okay, follow-up?
Yeah, Chair Anderson, I just want to say, I think I was the one at the earlier full board's meeting suggested that this could go to consent for final and PDA, and I'm surprised that, and it was to expedite this project, and I'm surprised that it didn't, and apologize to the group for the long delay that this has caused. And I think that we should work on a appropriate public noticing that gets us back to the original idea of consent could be brought up on the same day meeting if it has to be referred to the full board. So I think that something should be looked at to notify in the records to the public that this could happen, and have them be aware of that, and hopefully that would take care of this awkward delay.
Thank you. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion for final approval and PDA and final approval with the minor suggestions that the pergola be, the overhangs be extended on all layers and the decorative end cut to the primary members be done, and to relook at the heaviness of the clay tile flues and either lighten them up or use another solution that still gets the same free area.
Do I have a
I
s-
could, I
second?
would second, but I think we need to do findings for
Oh.
PDA first.
So the project can be found to be compatible as it is, number one, consistent with the design guidelines of the, applicable to the location of the project within the city. Number two, it's compatible with the architectural character and city of the neighborhood, in the particular neighborhood surrounding the project. There is, number three, there is no significant at all change in size, mass, bulk, height, and scale. There are no, number four, there are no sensitivities to adjacent landmarks and historic resources. Number five, there's no public views of the ocean or mountains affected. And six, there is very generous use and improvement of open space and landscaping.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, let's take a vote.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll begin with Chair Anderson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
No.
Board Member Noon,
Yes?
Board Member Six,
Yes.
and Board Member Sofrin.
Yes.
Motion passes, and would Board Member Anderson like to provide a reason?
Well, all the reasons I said in the comments, I think this is setting a precedent, if a precedent hasn't already been set, for a kind of surface treatment of architecture. The details, in my opinion, don't reflect a rigor of a treatment of a certain style. So that's why I voted no.
Thank you.
There is an appeal period, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to item 2. This is a continued item for project design approval. It's 102 West De La Guerra Street. It's a proposal to construct a new 4-story plus basement self-storage facility and a 5-story 4-to-4 unit residential apartment building on a site developed with a 77-space parking lot. The site is located within the Priority Housing Overlay and Central Business District. The project utilizes AB 2097, the city's average unit size density program, and the state density bonus law. No parking is proposed pursuant to AB 2097. A concession for height restrictions and a waiver for open yard standards as allowed under SDBL has been requested of the Community Development Director. Planning Commission approvals of 2 development plans and a tentative subdivision map were granted on May 1st. Property is adjacent to the El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District. The proposed project is adjacent to 101 West Canna and Perdido Street, the historic telephone building constructed in 1927, and across the street from 113 to 115 West De La Guerra Street, a historic Spanish colonial revival-style building designed by noted architects Edwards and Plunkett. Project design approval is requested. Project requires compliance with the project compatibility findings and urban design guidelines, last reviewed on November 19th, 2024.
Chair Anderson, if I could.
This is for Bob, I'm sorry.
I can make a few comments. Thank you, Chair Anderson and members of the board. As you stated, we are here for consideration of project design approval. And I do want to mention just quickly in terms of the adjacent historic resources, that this board is tasked with ensuring new development is compatible with and appropriately sensitive to those resources. So if you do feel the project is ready for PDA, we'll be looking for language in the motion. It's item number 4 of the findings to speak to that, in addition to the rest of the findings. And also, if you feel the project is ready for PDA, we'll be looking for an indefinite continuance for final approval. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair Anderson, I have a conflict, so I'll have to step down.
Thank you. All right, well, welcome back. Please introduce yourself and walk us through any changes, updates, etc.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Jeff Hornbuckle with the Cornell Collective.
Bob Cunningham, Arcadia Studio.
So this hasn't changed at all since the last time you saw it, which was back in November, as Barbara mentioned. We went to Planning Commission in May with the exact same plans, and it was approved by the Planning Commission as well. So we are here for PDA. So I'm going to keep it pretty brief. I'll just run through, give you guys kind of a quick refresher on where we're at. So building fronts onto De La Guerra here, residential portion of the building up front and the storage building in back. The storage building is served off of this alley that runs between Chapala and De La Vina Street. We've got a couple of loading spaces back here. Oops, always do that. The residential portion of the building is accessed off of a lobby here on De La Guerra Street. We've got bike parking, trash enclosure. The residential portion is 5 stories with the 5th story set back as we worked with you all on getting to that point, as well as we've pushed this stair enclosure back from the street as well. Storage building is 4 stories above grade with a full basement. These were just some interior unit plan studies that we did for the Planning Commission. I'm happy to go back to these if you all are interested. But the residential units stack exactly as it goes up, with the exception of at the 5th floor where we set back. Residential portion is approximately 21,000 square feet. Storage building is approximately 75,000 square feet. Here you can see the 5th floor of the residential building where we step back. We've got a mansard roof edge and then a common area roof deck for the residents. I'm just running through the renderings here. So this is the view looking at the building from pretty much straight on from the building on De La Guerra Street. We've created that base at the bottom, which we've sort of brought around to the rear of the building. You can see that 5th story steps back, and you can't even see it in this view, as well as that stair tower on the west side that has been stepped back. View kind of looking back from De La Vina Street, and then the view kind of from closer to Chapala Street. View from the intersection of Chapala and De La Vina. Again, you can see that 5th story setback. This is looking kind of directly across Chapala Street at the storage portion of the building, and then further up De La Vina, Chapala, oops. And then even further up Chapala, where you don't really see much of the building because of the Frontier building there. Now moving over to De La Vina Street, looking kind of directly across at the storage building again. Landscaping you can see that Bob will speak to in a couple of seconds. And then finally, a view looking down De La Guerra from the intersection of De La Guerra and De La Vina. Elevations, again, we can look at these if you all have questions. This is that alley side of the storage building where we've introduced that similar base and the three-point arch, which we're showing as an extrusion all the way through that opening to create that loading area. And with that, I think we can turn it over to Bob to briefly talk about landscape.
Very briefly, thank you. I believe we got positive comments last time we were before this board. The only thing that's changed on the plan is the two coast live oaks in the upper left-hand corner of the building and the lower left-hand corner. The sizes have been increased to 48-inch box.
I think that's it, yeah.
All right.
Questions?
Thank you. We will open up public comment for item number 2.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. At this time, I do not have any speaker slips for in-person public comment for this item, though if anyone would like to speak, they can come up now. Not seeing any movement. We don't have any participants online anymore, although I will acknowledge that we received written correspondence from Joan Davidson, Ron Robertson Jr., and Elizabeth Corden. I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. We'll close public comment. Did staff have any comments from Planning Commission meeting that we should know about?
No, we really didn't have anything that would be within your purview coming from Planning Commission. Thanks for the question.
They loved it.
Great. Okay. Okay, so let's go to questions from the board. Board Member 6?
Yeah, I do have a question for staff. Did Planning Commission weigh in on the sensitivity to the historic structure across the street?
I don't recall that. No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Whalen?
Yes, excuse me, Mr. Cunningham, could you refresh my memory of the plantings on the east or Chapala face? I see 3 trees which are really just squeezed in there, and then on one of your renderings and a previous discussion, you talked about a wall covering growth. So could you go over those plantings on that elevation, please?
Yes, sir. Those trees are sweet shades, and the vines are not clearly depicted, but yes, they are. They're in the corners of the little pop-ins, and again, that's English ivy. That I'm pretty sure is going to cover quite a bit of the building over time. It's a material that clings to the building and it just keeps growing.
That's what I recall. Thank you.
Board Member Soffer?
No questions.
Board Member Anderson?
Can you flip to the site plan quickly and then to the front elevation? Okay, so then this doesn't show the buildings on either side, or does it show it in the front? I'm trying to get a sense of the context here a little bit. Because I know in your photos it seems like there's, oh, there we go, so right up again, okay.
Yeah, it just shows kind of the edge of the outline of the building adjacent. And then on this side is just the parking lot, so the building is, out further closer to Chapala Street.
Okay, so then in the front elevation, if you can flip to that, and the alley behind the building, that's just kind of like, if you pan north, yeah, plan north. So that's transformer. Okay, and then to the elevations there. So that building on the left, is that what's drawn there? That's
Correct.
about that. Okay.
Yeah, so that's further back
Yeah.
from the De La Guerra frontage.
Okay. So what happens when there's a building on either side of this building that's the same height as this building? Do those units now look out into the other building in some hypothetical future?
Yeah, let me flip back to the site plan.
Because of the way you've got your plan, the units are arrayed around that elevator core.
Correct, yeah, correct. So these two units face onto this side yard, so yes, I mean, if there was a building built here, they would be looking at the side of that building. Likewise, if a building was built along this property line, they would be looking at the side or whatever configuration that building is arranged.
And in terms of the activation of the public realm, do you feel that this, whether it's in the landscaping or the offerings to the public, do you feel this building contributes to the development of the public realm in the city?
Does this building contribute to the public realm?
Yeah, in terms of, there's like a lot of parks in Santa Barbara, right? Or a lot of emphasis on trees or greenery, right? That the streetscape is this beautiful experience, right? So is this a building you feel contributes and enhances that experience?
Yes.
Okay. That's my questions.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions regarding materials. What is your thought for that base material that wraps around?
Painted plaster.
Okay. And then what's your approach for the lighting? Is it just at the doors?
Let me flip to the elevations.
Just at the,
I think in terms of, exterior building lighting, it's going to be fairly minimal, right? We're showing a fixture over the main entry lobby. There likely will be something at the entrance to the bike parking room, which we're really not showing. We're showing a wall sconce at the, stair enclosure door. And then likewise on this side, we're showing a wall sconce at the, this is that exit corridor out, and then this is the trash room. I would imagine we'd have some, sort of path lighting along here, but pretty minimal. These windows at the residential units are, they're non-operable, so there's no yard space, so I don't anticipate having any lighting at those.
what about on the roof deck? What's your thought?
Yeah, roof deck, we do show a couple of light fixtures. So this portion is a private patio for this unit, so we've got a couple of fixtures at that French door. We're showing a wall sconce at the, main door from the building to that
Okay.
patio space. Maybe we'd have some, step lighting in that parapet wall.
Okay, those are my questions. Any follow-up? All right, comments? They're here for project design approval. So, board member 6?
Yes, I supported it last time. I am supporting it this time.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Whalen?
I support project design approval for this project.
Okay, board member Soffren?
Yep.
Okay, board member Anderson?
My comment is that I think this project renders clearly the idea of architecture and history as a kind of facade, and the balance of programming and the architectural expression of that it takes with 4 stories of a solid white plaster wall is not aesthetically pleasing or beautiful.
Okay, thank you. I would support project design approval, and I would definitely consider the step lights where appropriate, and consider, low-level lighting throughout, so. Who would like to make a motion?
Chair Anderson, I would make a motion for project design approval with the project to return to full board for final, that there is even the historic project that is adjacent or across the street is indeed across the street. And I don't intend to be humorous, but it's a very small, quaint building, and this building makes it look more quaint and more small. So I think that there is no problem with the historic sensitivity to the adjacent historic, and that I can find that the project is compatible and consistent because it is, number one, consistent with the design guidelines applicable to the location of the project within the city. Number two, it's compatible with the architectural character of the city, the neighborhood, particularly in the neighborhood surrounding the project. Number three, it is a large building, but given the major portion of the mass bulk and scale is deep within the block, that I can find that it is appropriate size, mass bulk, height, and scale. And that it is doesn't adversely affect the historic resource across the street, as indeed it is across the street, and yeah, I'll just say that. And that it is, there are no public views of the ocean and mountains affected, and there is some open space and landscaping, and it is enough to carry the project.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Okay, let's take a vote.
Thank you. I'll begin with Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
No.
Board Member Six,
Yes.
and Board Member Soffren.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. And would you like to provide a comment again, Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, well, just everything I said, and regarding, let's say, bulk, mass, and scale, I don't find that given the amount of mass of storage in particular, with the amount of solid white plaster wall next to a parking lot, regardless of if the majority of the building is set deep into the urban block, I don't find that that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, or that it is aesthetically, I guess, pleasing or in the spirit of what the urban design guidelines describe. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is a 10-day appeal period. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. We are kind of on time. Can I go, or we're a little early, huh?
Couple of minutes.
Take a 3-minute recess? Okay, we'll take a 3-minute recess.
my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, well, I don't wanna jinx it, baby, and twist myself at the spine. Don't wanna overthink it, baby. It's just twist your body and mine. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, but I don't wanna jinx it, baby. Let's not get ahead of my time. Oh, but I don't wanna miss you, baby. So I stand up and speak my mind. Oh. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're channeling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're channeling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, oh.
Move on to item 3.
If the,
Would everyone like to pay attention to me? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, item 3. Thank you. Los Patos Underpass Removal Project. This is for a concept review. The project would consist of the removal of the Los Patos Way off-ramp underpass, owned and operated by the Union Pacific Railroad, installation of a new fill material and ballast, and the placement of new tracks on that fill. The project would also include the construction of temporary railroad tracks, commonly referred to as shoe-fly tracks, okay, to maintain rail operations while work on the main track takes place. While the proposal is a distinct city project, it is closely related to the other separate approved projects in the area, the Los Patos Cabrillo Roundabout and the UPRR Bridge Replacement Project, along with the California Department of Transportation US 101 High Occupancy Vehicle Widening Project's 4E North Segment Project. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. Project will require compliance with the project compatibility findings and Highway 101 Coastal Parkway guidelines. Okay, welcome. Staff has something?
I'm working on getting a PowerPoint up for them, so.
Okay.
I wanted to say that this project has gone to the Historic Landmarks Commission a couple of times. It's a historic resource, so it went to them for the historic site and structures report. And also, there's an EIR that was prepared, and they looked at the historic portion of the EIR. And then that EIR also went to the Planning Commission. And so once the historic resource gets removed, because it's an EIR, it's being demolished, there'll no longer be a historic resource. So the project after that is coming to you because historic resource is gone. So you'll be looking at it as a new project. So concept today for that. And then The project will go to Planning Commission for a CDP, certification of the EIR, go back to HLC for the demo findings, and then we'll come back to you like as a regular project for PDA and final. So many steps, but this will be your first concept review of what the project will look at the end. Yeah, it is.
A couple things happening.
Okay, do you have a question?
Chair Anderson, yes, to Ms. Kennedy, would it be appropriate to ask what the salient comments of the HLC were regarding this? Because I deem that they approved it, right? But what were the discussion points?
Well, I think there are mixed views about the demolition because some thought it was historic and some not. But they were in support of the mitigation measures that were proposed in the draft EIR, which included using the sandstone if possible and using the steel if possible to propose a interpretive display in that location once it's removed. That's
Thank
the
you,
essence
that's
of
very
that.
helpful.
Okay, welcome. If you could introduce yourself and walk us through your plans, you'll have 15 minutes.
Sounds good. I'm Eric Goodall. I'm the supervising streets engineer for the city of Santa Barbara. This is the Los Patos underpass removal project, and as Kathy mentioned, this had previously gone to HLC for review of the steel girders and the sandstone abutments, as those are, well, the whole bridge as a whole, and those are the elements that they focused on as historic elements. This project is tangential to the Highway 101 freeway southbound off-ramp, well, the Highway 101 widening project. As part of that project, this off-ramp at Los Patos will be closed. And in conjunction with that, Union Pacific Railroad has requested that we remove the Los Patos underpass. Took a couple of conversations with them to understand what exactly that means. Effectively, they would like the bridge and abutments removed and fill placed in place of the bridge so that their tracks run on fill rather than running on this bridge in perpetuity, so they avoid a public nuisance and ongoing maintenance. I'll note there are some projects that the city's working on that are also in conjunction with the Highway 101 project. One that we just completed is the Cabrillo and Los Patos roundabout, which is noted as phase 1 in this picture. The phase 2 work, we're still working on the design and finishing that to start construction in 2027. That involves extending that roundabout work to the north up to the Union Pacific Railroad area, widening the railroad bridge so that we can fit multi-use paths and a widened roadway through there and connect to the work that's being done with the 101 to create the northbound, the southbound on and off ramps at Cabrillo. Shown here is the portion of Los Patos off-ramp that will be removed as part of the 101 work, and highlighted here, or shown here with the arrow, is where the Union Pacific Railroad Bridge exists today. And at this location, right now, this is sort of a turnaround for emergency vehicles, and you have the off-ramp going through here. Once that off-ramp no longer exists, this turnaround will be turned into a cul-de-sac. It will still function the same for emergency vehicles and for those going down the block. Here, it's a little bit difficult to see exactly what's happening. This just shows call-outs for what existing features are there. We have the existing bridge, the existing underpass going through there, and then this turnaround area. This is what the underpass looks like today. What we're proposing is, as I mentioned previously, remove the bridge, fill in the area so that it will look similar to the fill areas that are outside of the bridge limits. And then within the city right-of-way area, we would have a gravel path with some mulch on the side. We'd block that off with a black vinyl coated chain link fence and a rolling wrought iron gate so that city crews would have access to this area for whatever maintenance and tree trimming, pruning, whatever kind of access we needed there, as well as any access that Union Pacific might need. So we'd have a small driveway into that area, but we would more or less turn this into a cul-de-sac. This is the rendering we have of what that would look like. So you can see that fill area. We have the chain link fence going around, keeping this area more blocked off from the public so that it would just be used for city access to whatever we needed to do back there. Proposing a gravel path as well as mulch so we can keep all of this as permeable as possible, but having a concrete driveway there with the curb cut. Because it's a historic structure and the removal of that structure will require a commemorative display, we've identified with this blue arrow an approximate location of that commemorative plaque and display. The exact details of what that will look like are still being worked out. At this point, we're anticipating reuse of the sandstone abutments in part at this location and potentially at the Cabrillo Railroad Bridge that's going to be reconstructed. So the thought is some of that stone may be incorporated into the display itself. So rather than just having a metal pole and a stand, that stone may become part of the stand with the commemorative plaque on top. The text in that plaque is one of the things that's going to HLC at the completion of following the next planning commission meeting. Here's a little material board on what exactly we're proposing. So black vinyl coated fencing adjacent to the wrought iron rolling gate. And then we're gonna have, we're proposing gravel with mulch for the pathway. We're not proposing any additional plantings, just letting whatever native plants are there live and thrive. For information purposes, I included this slide. This is the planting palette that was proposed and used for the Cabrillo roundabout area. So if there is an interest in having additional plantings beyond the native plants that are there, we would likely go with some of these options. There's a number of ground covers and small plants that were planted at the Cabrillo roundabout, as well as some trees. The next actions that are required for this project, it requires project design and final design approval by the Architectural Board of Review. It requires a coastal development permit to allow the proposed development in the non-appealable jurisdiction, and the final EIR certification to be approved by Planning Commission. And we also will need to have demolition approval findings and the interpretive display reviewed and approved by the Historic Landmarks Commission. So with that, are there any questions?
All right, thank you. We will open up public comment for item 3.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. At this time, I do not have any speaker slips for this particular item for in-person public comment. We do not have any participants online, and we didn't receive any written correspondence for this item, so I'm going to give it back to you.
Okay, we'll close public comment for item 3 and go to questions from the board. Actually, I have a quick question for staff. So, can we comment on the fill for the tracks? Is it part of this project? Because it sounded like that's not in the city's
I think you can,
jurisdiction.
if you want plantings on the fill,
Yeah, okay,
I believe so,
okay.
in our jurisdiction. Well,
Because on the plan, it looked like that was not part of the city.
Right, I'll go back to that sheet so we can look at that.
I think you can have comments whether the railroad will agree to.
Yeah.
That is another.
Yeah, got it.
Right, so the
certain
fill
area.
area, as is shown on the sheet, is entirely within the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way area.
Got it. So most likely not. Okay. Board Member Anderson, do you have any questions?
So, can you zoom out a little bit on the context here? Or is this the only site plan we have here today? Yeah, maybe this one's maybe better. Andre Clark Bird Refuge. Okay, so I guess what are we commenting on? Just the aesthetics of the approach to this connector piece primarily?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I understand.
So let's see that rendering again. So that's the only way it's going to be seen?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Having designed many a security gate. So is this track going to be embedded in that gravel? So there's going to be a little rail thing in there?
The track for the gate, yeah.
Okay. And then there's a bunch of footings for the gate. So you're going to do some sort of remediation to the landscape wherever that occurs?
The concept at this point was we let the native plants sort of grow back over that space, since we're not proposing additional plantings at this time.
And these are all just native grasses and eucalyptus trees, it looks like, yeah.
Correct.
Okay. And then, do you have the material board here?
Material board is here, so because we're not proposing additional plantings, we have the vinyl coated fence, the wrought iron gate, and the gravel path with mulch.
All right, thanks.
Board Member Soffin?
Yeah. Sorry to just be confused. So this went to HLC, but like, if I understand right, what you're saying, Ms. Kennedy, is that this will not be a historic landmark element anymore, so.
Correct. They're removing the historic resource
Okay, so
completely.
can we go to that, like a picture of its current condition? Okay, so if I understand right, the HLC is like, yeah, you can demolish this, but then we want you to save the sandstone and we want you to save the steel. And I'm curious, like, was this designed by like a famous architect?
The rationale,
But was it designed by anyone famous?
no.
Okay, because like, I don't think it's really aesthetically pleasing right now. It looks like it's neglected, disrepair. So, do we have any idea how much it will cost us additionally to repurpose the steel and the stone?
That's something Union Pacific owns, those elements. We're not even sure if they'll let us buy them from them.
Okay, so we would have to possibly buy them from them, and this would be like added tax dollar, like sort of, we'd be wasting a lot of money. And I'm sorry, I know that maybe I'm outside of purview, I just want to make a point. It seems a little absurd to make a monument to a bridge that has no, like, that we don't even own, and that we would have to spend taxpayer dollars for like a monument at a cul-de-sac. It seems a little silly. So that's a question I have. I'm also kind of curious, why does the city want to put a gate there and have this access road that leads to nothing?
The interest is there have been nuisance activities in the area, and it's not anticipated that they'll cease just because we close off the off-ramp. So there may be a need in the future for a city to access that area to address whatever activities are going on back there.
And has there been any concern that, or thought put towards it, that having this road with a gate would pique curiosity, like what's behind the gate? What's the city hiding?
I think there's a potential.
Kind of curious about that. And then, so the HLC, and this is first now, so the HLC has said that we have to make this monument. They want to make a monument out of this.
Well, they had some suggestions about different ways to do it, so there's no final decision yet.
Okay.
We don't know if we could get the steel, and if some people wanted steel as part of it, I think others didn't. The sandstone, I think everyone's interested in that, but how it looks, we don't really know yet at all.
And then, so then, if I get it right, this is still going back to HLC, even though?
They have to make demolition findings after the EIR is certified. So that's another step. And then we would have them look at the interpretive display, however that.
But if
presented.
it's not going to be a historic element, then why would they even have that purview to do that?
Because it's a mitigation measure, so they would look at the interpretive displays that are for the purpose of explaining the historic source that was there.
So during comments, am I allowed to, like, can we say, like, okay, it's going to go back to HLC, and we would like HLC to consider some comments made from today?
About the,
I'd kind of like to say, why are you making them make this monument? It seems like a waste of taxpayer dollars.
I think the best you can do is you can put that in the motion.
Okay.
And that's about it, so.
That's all
I
for
think
questions.
you could maybe recommend materials too if it has to go forward.
Yeah.
Okay, Vice Chair Whalen? Questions?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. If I can pick up on that point and with Ms. Kennedy, this was the old coast road. This originally is how you drove in and out of Santa Barbara from the 1880s onward. The railroad didn't arrive till 1900, so this framed the entryway to Santa Barbara for the early part of the 20th century. That's the historic significance. Now, I full well understand that, if I'm correct on that, that's the historic bearing of it. But the sandstone is not that viable. It hasn't been well maintained. Steel is rusting. What I really like to drill down a bit on, Mr. Goodall, is this charmingly named shoe fly track. Could you go back to the plan? In my mind, I imagine that a whole separate track has to be built before they can take this one out. Is that what's driving the removal of the bridge for the width that you need to construct the shoe fly? So is the shoe fly on the north or the south of the existing track?
So the shoe fly would go to the north of the existing track, but it's not a driving factor for the removal of the bridge. The removal of this bridge is driven purely by Union Pacific's request in conjunction with the work that we're doing at Cabrillo to widen that bridge.
Yeah.
And that bridge's widening is required in order to fit the roadway width that's necessary.
That one I
understand.
understand. They just don't want to take care of this one anymore. It's kind
Yeah,
of a
to some
pain.
extent.
I can understand that.
Yes.
It's degraded. So will the shoe fly be removed at some point?
Yes, so the shoe fly would be in place strictly to keep rail access while we're rebuilding the other bridge and removing this. Once that's complete, the shoe fly gets removed, the use of the track goes back to the main line, and we remove all of the temporary track that was built.
That's a lot of shuttling of material. It would be helpful, at least for my own mind, to see the shoe fly illustrated on the plan.
Okay.
But that being said, I think that's my only question. Thank you.
Vice Chair, or Board Member Six?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I go back to something Board Member Safran indicated is I don't understand the need to fence this area off. I think, you say there's problems with nuisance there. Well, the attraction is the graffiti ability of the bridge and so forth. And if it was just wide open, it just becomes another part of the environment down there with the land and free area between it and the bird refuge, and so I don't see why there has to be any fencing off of that unless you're going to store materials or something in it. And I just don't understand that. I won't, resist or vote negatively on it, but I certainly don't understand it. And the other thing is, with how far does the city, or when, what happens to the off-ramp prior from the freeway prior to turning under the bridge? Is that in Caltrans' hands, and we will see that as we have seen other improvements on 101? Or is
I
it
think you're
just,
referring to the section of the off-ramp. I'll go back to that slide. Sort
Yeah,
of this section here.
the green?
is- Yeah.
What happens there?
So Caltrans, as part of their abandonment, will demo all of the asphalt. I haven't seen on their plan what they specifically are proposing there, but I think it's just demo all of that. That'll likely become shoulder for the work they're doing, but I'd have to look at their plan to verify what they're doing.
So we'd have to ask, or we'd have to depend upon the Caltrans to, if we wanted to landscape and heal this area, it's out of the hands of the city. And
Commissioner,
the condition that we're approving a city project, and then depending upon an unknown willingness for Caltrans to come back and heal what's affected here is kind of risky.
So staff has some comments and maybe.
so you did, the ABR did give project design approval for the HOV lane project already. So they're coming back for final on this northern section, the 4E North section. So you'll have an opportunity to look at that more carefully. But that's part of the purview that you've reviewed already on that side. So we can, when we bring that back, you can look at that specifically.
Okay.
Yeah, and that'll be back to you, I think, in July.
Okay.
It seems like a cart before the horse, but, okay.
Okay, I guess I don't have any questions, I have more comments, so we can go into comments.
Oh, I have another question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Is the bird refuge a part of the city-owned property? Yeah.
It is city-owned property. It's not part of the street right away, but it is city-owned.
Okay. And was any consideration given to making this into a publicly accessible park?
This additional portion here, that's the road right away?
Whatever the scope of this connector piece is, yeah, that's being currently fenced off in the proposal.
So the Andrew Clark Bird Refuge is a separate contained parcel. It is city-owned, but it is its own parcel. So we didn't evaluate, I guess it would be ceding the road right-of-way or annexing that into the Bird Refuge parcel.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, but tearing off of that, would you consider keeping the fence along the right-of-way instead of squaring it off?
Yeah, that's something we can look at and evaluate.
And then you could maybe consider, instead of the gate as close as it is, doing some stone remembrance of the, I don't know, the bridge abutments. I did have one question I forgot. Do you know the slope of the fill for the new tracks?
Offhand, I don't recall what it is. I don't think we show that either, but we could show that in the next.
Just curious
drawing.
if it's like climbable or if it's like 2-to-1, so.
It'll be similar to the rest of the slope that's adjacent. It is climbable.
Oh, it is,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, let's go into comments. They're here for concept, so Board Member Anderson.
My comment is that I second the kind of, why is there a gate fencing this off? It seems kind of redundant. I also think that this is a design opportunity. Listening to Board Member Whelan's context about the history, I think that's really interesting, and I don't think we need to be overly attached to preserving the material here, as Board Member Soffren is talking about. But I think this could be a really cool opportunity to turn this whole area into a public park, potentially, where you connect this to the bird refuge, and there's some sort of narrative that's told about how this used to be the old gateway to enter the city from the Old Coast Highway. Maybe the sandstone blocks could become benches in the park or something. I think otherwise it's kind of just a little bit of a confusing moment for me as a kind of dead end where you just look through this fenced off area and you look at a big berm underneath a railroad track. So that's my comments.
Board Member Soffren?
So first and foremost, just for the record, I love the HLC and I'm very supportive of preserving historical elements of Santa Barbara and Santa Barbara's integrity. I just have apprehensions about, spending money and if this is the right way to spend money with trying to build a memorial to this. Like you could go on and on. Do you do a traffic study and say, well, how many people are going to come down here? And is that good for the residents of this cul-de-sac? Like what's left here? I understand that there's some history here. I don't agree, with this roadway though. And and the fence and the gate, because there are many parts of, if someone wants to say safety, well, there are lots of areas where, people can walk across the train tracks in many areas. My concern is that by putting the fence, putting the gate, that you create more opportunity for homeless people to set up encampments and create more problems, maybe, build fires. That gate becomes also a matter of security for them with those illegal encampments. And I think that if it's left open, it's less secure for situations or opportunities like that. So I hope I've stayed within my purview, but those are my comments.
Vice Chair Whalen?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. As a concept design, I don't really see a lot here. It looks just like a piece of leftover a roadway that's done in the simplest fashion possible. I would like to see more of a design. To that regard, I realize the railway is fenced off at pretty much every point. Well, I see no need for that fragment of road. If it's going to be left as a remnant for historical, perhaps a marker and an interpretive display could talk about that. It does seem to me that it could be planted out. If you really need a gate there, I don't see any need for a rolling gate to get a vehicle in there. If the whole fence line was pushed back to the right-of-way, which is shown to some degree, and the area landscaped, and perhaps there's a pullout for a vehicle with a modest swinging gate, I think you could save a lot of money and come up with a better end if you would go to your illustration view. I think this really says it all. I don't really see a landscape design here. It's more of a plan view solution that needs to be worked out in a more sophisticated way with plantings. I'm not sure, I'd have to go back and look, but even a walkway, it's just not a very satisfying experience for the end of Los Patos Way. I think it could be done with a lot more design sophistication. Thank you.
Board Member Six?
I agree with majority of what has been said, especially the redundancy of kinking the fence out beyond the right-of-way line and bring it back to the right-of-way line and just planting this out and vagrants and so forth that we should suggest to the Landmarks Committee that whatever commemorative display they do would be out in, further out in the open, where the benches and so forth for the bird refuges. So this doesn't, it again doesn't become a attraction to nuisance.
Yeah, I agree with all those comments. I definitely think considering moving the fence back, and I mean, even looking at this image is definitely inviting people to wonder what's going on. So I agree with those comments. Who would like to make a motion? This would be for indefinite continuance, is that right?
Motion. I make a motion that this continue under indefinite continuance, and that consideration of the following comments be factored in, which would be exploring, where the fence is located in regard to the right of way. Does there need to be this fence and a gate with the roadway? What is the purpose? Is it really viable and important? To suggest to the HLC, maybe if there is going to be some sort of memorial, maybe it's just a simple plaque that could be maybe at the curb where it acknowledges the historical significance of this road, but is it necessary for all the sandstone and steel I think, do we want to say something about the concern about the north side of this? We are only seeing one
We're
side of
gonna
this.
see that
Yeah.
when they come back
In the 101 project.
in the
Yeah.
101 project.
It sounds
so
like it's not part of
It's
this
not part of
scope.
this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys think I should include in this?
Consider the addition of landscaping.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there was the talk about just allowing it to infill with the natural plants.
I would say, consider,
Consider the landscaping improvements that will be required to, ensure that this is filled back in naturally,
Yeah.
adequately, in an adequate manner.
yes.
Is that?
I'll second that motion, but I want to be careful to hear from the applicant that I haven't heard from the applicant a real strong reason for this kick out of the fence and the establishment of this area, and I just want to make sure we're not stepping on some vital, functional, essential thing that we're overlooking.
No, we'll evaluate the need for the fence at its location as well as the path, along with the comments.
All right, okay, thanks.
Yes, I would add to that, consider relocating the fence and gate back to the right-of-way line and doing a sophisticated landscape plan that terminates Los Pastos Way in a comprehensive manner.
That's already in the motion.
Yeah. That's okay.
Good.
Good.
Putting a fine point on it.
All right, let's take a vote. Good over there?
Thank you. I'll begin with Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen,
Yes.
Board Member Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Six,
Yes.
and Board Member Sovereign.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe the railroad will pay for the fence.
Yeah. Good luck. All right, item 4, look at that, right on time. One-time pre-application consultation, 740 Dolores Drive, the Vic Trace Reservoir. Did I lose some people? Okay.
Can we leave Steve on for the whole meeting?
Yes. Okay, I think we're gonna just take a minute break. I don't know where everyone's going. All right, welcome back. Item number 4, 740 Dolores Drive, Vic Trace Reservoir. This project consists of demolishing the existing 10 million gallon drinking water storage reservoir and replacing it with 2 new 5 million gallon buried drinking water storage reservoirs at the Vic Trace Reservoir. Additionally, 2 valve vaults will be installed to accommodate access to the reservoir's influent and effluent piping systems. Other site improvements include the construction of an approximately 1,400 square foot pump station building and an approximately 400 square foot city IT communications building, an access road extension, terraces and retaining walls, consolidation of antennas, landscaping, and delineated parking spaces. Off-street improvements include replacement and relocation of the incoming water transmission main pipeline along La Coronilla Drive and the La Vista del Oceano pressure reducing valve station at La Vista del Oceano Drive and Cliff Drive, which will be abandoned and relocated to either a proposed private easement or right-of-way location at Dolores Drive and Meigs Road southeast corner. Relocation of the PRV will require construction of new pipelines along Dolores Drive, Ricardo Avenue, and La Vista del Oceano Drive within the public right-of-way. This is for comments only. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. It does require submittal of a formal planning application subject to compliance with project compatibility findings. Welcome. Anything from staff before they get started?
Just briefly, I will note that this project is in the pre-application phase, so this is a one-time voluntary concept review. We will be coming back to you once the formal application is submitted. And then also, the project description lists off-site improvements. Today, we're going to be focusing really on the improvements on the project site. The details regarding off-site improvements are still in development. There may be some minor above-ground improvements. Most of the off-site work will be within buried pipelines within the public right-of-way, but any above-ground improvements would be subject to ABR review.
Noted. Okay. Well, welcome. Please introduce yourselves, and you'll have 15 minutes to present.
Great. Before we get started, hi, my name is Kelly Bork. I'm a senior project engineer at the city. Matt Ward is here. He's the water system manager and the owner of this project, and he'd like to say some words.
Good afternoon, Chair Anderson and board members. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We're really excited. This project's been decades in the making. Really, it was kind of a setback with drought in terms of infrastructure for some of our existing assets. And so we're excited to bring this to you as an introduction. And we've been working diligently through the planning process with design as well as master planning of infrastructure. So this is a critical facility for us. It is really a storage hub that serves nearly the entire city. So plenty more to present on this. So I'll just go ahead and turn it back over to the project team. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matt. Jan and Paul, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Jan Hockhauser, Hockhauser Blatter Architecture and Planning.
Paul Jordan, landscape architect with the firm Jordan and Bain, Ventura.
So we do just have a 15-minute presentation. If we go a minute or two over, I apologize. It's a big project. So the plan is I'll just describe the project in more detail and provide some context, and then I'll pass it along to our architects to describe those features. So this is for the Vic Trace Reservoir Replacement Project. This is a drinking water project. The current reservoir is located between Meigs Road and Cliff Drive on a hilltop. It was built in 1956, so it's about 70 years old and about time to be replaced. The picture of the existing reservoir is shown here. It's basically a buried concrete trapezoidal swimming pool with a metal roof. As Matt mentioned, it's considered a critical drinking water storage facility because it stores about 10 million gallons of drinking water locally. That water comes down from Cater Water Treatment Plant up in San Roque via gravity to this site. And it serves 60,000 people, or about 70% of the city. And in addition, it's kind of small here, but the site is also considered critical for the city's communications system. It houses towers for police and fire communications. Here are two pictures of the existing site conditions. So on the left is the driveway to the project site, how our operators access the site on La Coronilla. As you can see, the reservoir is sort of up on the hilltop, a bit hidden from sight. And then you can also see the site from Dolores Drive at La Cornea Park. It is also up here with the overhead electrical lines. Here's a list of our design objectives for this project and some design constraints just for your consideration. First and foremost, this is replacing aging infrastructure. The cost and the resources to maintain this facility now outpace its replacement. So it is scheduled for replacement. Construction timeline is 2028. We'll be seismically bringing the structure up to modern codes. We'll be hopefully maintaining water quality, enhancing stormwater capture on site, making the on-site security more robust, and overall increasing the resiliency of the water system. And then some design constraints, state regulations as well as our city charter states that this, water revenues can only be spent on water projects and any facilities to support that. So anything outside of the infrastructure we're replacing and, I guess access to the site would have to come from general fund. The single entrance needs to be maintained on La Cornea Drive. We need to bring the site up to current federal security regulations that just have tightened security for water infrastructure facilities. There are some hydraulic limitations on site. We need to keep the communications facilities due to the unique location that allows police and fire to have comms over to the mesa. And then lastly, the designs we're showing you today have not incorporated the community development's pre-application review comments. So we are currently reviewing those and will incorporate those. The drawings don't show it very well, but this is an illustration of how the reservoirs will look on site post-project. They'll be completely buried, and we'll be installing 2 identical 5 million gallon tanks at the site. We'll also be restoring access roads, facilities, replacing 2 buildings, modernizing the radio equipment, new landscaping, fencing, gates, and then as Patsy Price mentioned, we'll be doing some right-of-way improvements. And those are shown on this figure here, mostly along La Cornea Drive, Dolores Drive, and Ricardo at this time. And just to end my piece, we had our first design workshop with the community at the beginning of May. Generally, the community wanted to see increased site security of the site. There's been trespassing in the past. They would like to see native and drought-tolerant plants, improved wildfire safety, better drainage, addressing erosion that's currently happening on site. They'd like us to consider public access, and lastly, to protect whatever trees we can on site and at La Cornea Park. So with that, I'll pass it along to Jan.
Okay, thank you. So from the context, I think it's important that the board appreciate the context for this site. When I first got involved, I said, well, where is this site visible? It's a sizable parcel within this residential neighborhood. And the interesting thing is even from afar, if you're up on the Riviera, you can look to this site. Or if you're at like Campanile Hill and you look east, you can see the site, but not very well. So the impacts, I feel, the board should understand are being improved from the standpoint we're removing like a huge metal roof. That said, I think it's important that the board appreciate the functional parameters from all the different departments that participated in the development of this proposal. I was kind of taken aback when I would suggest certain things when they said, no, we can't do that, we have to have this, or we have to have this. And that speaks to the kind of the large open covering that you see in the site plan before you. But the comforting thing is that the only vantage point of visibility into the site is from the main entryway. And there's not a lot of visual impact other than that, and to call it an impact is something I'm sure we'll discuss. But then the issue turned to, well, what kind of landscaping can be improved here? And I'm going to let the landscape architect address that in more detail. But the basic premise was fire clearance, accessibility, on-site movement, turnarounds, and those things, maintenance, tree roots. A lot of these things drove a very careful consideration of how this site is planted and what trees had to be removed and what trees could stay and what kind of landscaping would be provided as part of the proposal. So the other thing I want to communicate to the board is the idea that we're here before you conceptually today. We're not trying to sell the board anything because we haven't really looked at some of the finer design refinements, and such as the buildings being proposed, they're in flux in terms of the requirements, like the communications building is not something that's been sorted out yet. So these are just kind of engineering approaches that were put forth. And another one of the requirements, for instance, was the idea that the Public Works really wants metal roofs on this. So that kind of dictated some of the response. No design work has been put forth yet for these specific buildings. There are going to be lots of features that we want to study and come before the board to look at, such as the paving, coloration. Should these things recede into the landscape? I mean, they're in the context of neighborhoods that when you're driving down La Cornilla, suddenly you have a gap, the entry driveway, and a view into these structures. So we're really looking for feedback and having you as a board understand like what this proposal about, what the parameters are driving the decision-making to date. And I just want to underscore the effort that's been made to kind of integrate and coordinate all the different departments that have a stake in functionality, water purification, water delivery, those kinds of things. So maybe at this point, we'll allow the landscape architect to kind of discuss the
Yeah,
approach
you have
to
about 5
landscaping.
minutes right now, so maybe let's do the site layout and then your landscaping at the same time.
Okay, that's fine. This is in a high fire hazard area. It's in the coastal interior zone. So this is a zone map, fuel mod zones. I've taken a very conservative approach with zone 1, which the plant limit is 12 inches high. And we've wrapped zone 1 around the tanks, the building, and the access road. So what you're going to see in that zone is gravel immediately around the tanks and then some low spreading ground covers. Zone 2 and 3 kind of radiate out at 20-foot intervals. When we get to zone 4, we can have some larger shrubs and trees. The trees have to be a certain, and we've been following the city's requirements for fuel mod zones as far as height. In zone 2, you're allowed to have a shrub 18 feet apart, a shrub that only gets 4 feet high. Zone 3, it can get 6 feet high, but it has to be 18 feet apart. And because of maintenance, we have selected low-growing ground covers that will fill in the entire area. The 18-foot spacing wouldn't apply because we're staying below the height minimum, and we're doing that so that we could have really good weed suppression and have ease of maintenance. The plant list that we've selected, can you go to the next one? The trees, what you see right there, the trees are California natives. They all have habitat value. The one tree that we're not showing on there, we have a few on the site, is the coast live oak. That didn't get included in this slide, but we do have a couple of oak trees. And we realize we're going to have a mitigation requirement. We're losing 4 oaks around the building. They're not great specimens, but we will be planting some additional oaks. The ground covers that you see there, the myroporum is a low-growing ground cover, very easy to maintain, along with the cotoneaster, which is also low-growing. Those would be primarily in zone 1 and 2. As we get further out, we're increasing the size of the ceanothus. They'll get 2 to 3 feet high, and then 18 inches will be closer to the tanks. And then at the end, the rhamnus, coffeeberry gets about 3 feet, and that's another ground cover shrub that we'll be using. So with that in mind, here's the plan. It's in progress to date. You'll see a couple of view corridors. The residents on the north do have ocean views. and you'll see with those addressed there. We want to make sure we don't have any trees that block their views. Also, the residents on the south, we've included fuel mod zone 1 adjacent to the property line. We don't want to be planting any large trees or shrubs that are close to those units, so we're actually showing the zone 1 moving out from the property line. So you'll see a mix of trees and shrubs throughout. They're spaced far enough away that we don't have any fuel ladders or any fuel problems with the tanks. So any questions, be happy to answer.
You have a couple minutes left. Can you just, while you're on here, walk us actually through the site and talk about slope and how you're entering and what's located where, and give us some orientation?
Sure. Trying to decide what would be best. Maybe this one. So this doesn't, the current site looks a lot like this, so we kind of mirrored operations, just improved them. So today, and then in the proposed project, all access would be through this driveway. There's a proposed gate to prevent folks from, I guess, hanging out in this vicinity. You come into the driveway, and this first larger building will be a pump station building, housing a couple pumps. To the left will be IT's building, so where they'll maintain all the equipment they need for these 2 towers. Then there'll be an additional fence gate that will stop access for IT and sort of any other third parties. Water will be the one accessing there. And then at the site itself, there's a series of different access roads around the site. The California gold gravel sort of rendering here, that's the top of the reservoir area. There's these 2 vault structures that allows the operators to go down and operate the valves. Then what we decided to do was, this is a retaining structure to allow this vault to be about 10 feet less deep, so safer for the operators and for easy staging access for whenever we needed to replace the equipment in that vault. This is the first access road. This will all be rated for fire personnel, as there'll be some hydrants around this area. And then the furthest out access road will be like an interlock paver that will allow for landscape maintenance, for site surveillance and security, number of functions, and those all wrap around the site. Happy to answer any questions on the site layout.
Okay, thank you. We will open up public comment for item number 4.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So we do have 1 speaker slip for in-person public comment at this time. We'll have Eli Isco. You'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Thanks. I just was curious about what was happening, and I haven't seen the plans for the outside of the area of the 80 tanks, so I don't have a question because I haven't seen the plan. But I'll wait. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We don't have any other speaker slips for in-person public comment. Though if anyone else would like to speak, they can come up at this time. And I'm not seeing any movement. We don't have any participants online, and we did not receive any written correspondence on this item, so I'm going to give it back to you.
Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment. I'm not sure what he meant by outside area of the tanks. Is that outside the property?
Do you mean like along the streets?
Yeah, what the plan was for La Cordia.
Oh, Oh, that's okay. If you're willing to wait, I can talk to you after the meeting. Or you can feel free to leave your email or phone number, and I can follow up if you need to leave.
Okay, so let's move on to questions from the board. Vice Chair Whalen, would you like to begin?
Sure, thank you, Chair Branch. Let's start with an easy one. I take it you have to drain this thing to build the new one. I don't expect an answer, but it seems like if this is a primary source, you've put your considerable brain power to use how to manage that, but still, it seems to be quite frightening. Getting on to the easier ones. Is there any reason the buildings can't be combined into one structure, or did I hear you correctly that it's money sources?
We explored having them as a joint building, but due to the different funding mechanisms and facilities maintaining them, they prefer them to be separate.
Well, so it's a preference, not absolute.
Yeah, it's not absolute, but it makes everything a lot easier amongst all the departments using those facilities.
And then to the public comment there, is Lock or Ineo Park access to the public? Is that an open park space to the public?
Yes.
I'll have to go take a look at that. And you talked about the different paved areas. So you have asphalt, paver block, Santa Barbara Gold or California Gold. So you have those three different paving materials spread around. Yes, and what's the reasoning behind metal roofs on the buildings?
We currently do not have metal roofs on the buildings, so this would be the first one. But it's usually for ease of maintenance, and as these facilities evolve, the pump station itself would probably be built to last another 100 years. The equipment and replacing it usually requires going in and out of the roof, and it's a lot easier to make new or modified penetrations rather than like a shingle or an asphalt roof. And lastly, I'll add, for fire safety, they'd prefer fire roofs.
Sure.
Or metal roofs.
Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair Anderson.
Board Member Six?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Well, aside, I think there are, we obviously would prefer a mission tile on those roofs than metal, and I think that some of the mission tile on the ancient Roman structures are still without maintenance. So anyway, if I understand this correctly from your sections and so forth, is that you are not going higher than the lip of the existing reservoir, and you are taking the fill, additional fill that the larger tanks would, the new design would produce, and spreading it around the area so you don't have to take all that out of the site, correct?
Kind of. So there will be a net export of soils.
But you're trying to put most of the export on the hills by broadening the hill, correct?
Yeah, agreed. We're trying to, right now, the hill slopes, the usable space on site is really limited to the top acreage for the reservoir. With this new project, we're going to be optimizing the site for much better access and use. So there will be a lot of soil movement in and around the site, and then a net export of soil just to accommodate all the terracing.
Okay, so I realize now with the profile of the hill, I have a few other questions, that most of the surrounding neighbors do not see the hill nor the tank. But if it's, I'm uncertain, and I don't know whether you know, that if this hill is broadened and retaining walls are closer to the the outside of the site, whether neighbors would begin to see this because of the broader hill.
There are about maybe a dozen and a half homes that do have backyards onto the site, and they will see the hill and have commented on our landscape plans so far. But agreed, a lot of folks, especially on the southern side, they look to the ocean, so they don't see the hill
So
per
let me
se.
understand, the southern side, is that La Cresta Drive? See, I don't understand.
The plan view, the landscape plan view would be most informative. There you go.
So it seems like, yeah, go ahead. The left-hand sheet is, I'm sorry, right, the other left. That's La Cresta Drive.
Correct.
And are not those homes basically the same elevation as the property?
Yes.
And they have a view over the property to the ocean?
They Yes, mostly this ravine here.
Okay. So those folks will be affected. Now, are there any downslope on the other sides that might be affected by the broadening of the hill?
So I pulled up Google Maps just to.
Yeah, I've seen it too. I think it's, I don't think we have an answer, but right now, but I'm concerned about that. Because now it's a steep hill. Well, I've gone through that. So,
Board Member Six, if I may, when we return, of course, this is conceptual, we will have much more accurate cross-sections that help show the existing relative to what's proposed. So
Can you make sure that your microphone is on?
Oh, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
You have a spare one over there too, so you got two.
Okay. So one of the things that we hope to prepare for the board is to actually show them accurate cross-sections through the site into the neighborhoods.
okay.
So you can get that relative change.
So the other question I have is, it seems like you have the tanks, and then you have a retaining wall, and you're flattened out with your mulch, and then you have a roadway, and then you have retaining walls, and then you have your landscape. And it seems, why, like, if you're trying to minimize your broadening, well, my attitude is to minimize the broadening of the hill to lessen the threat of views to the neighbors, why aren't those sloped so, you don't have to don't have to push that much of the material away? So you could, for instance, closest to the tanks, why isn't all that between the road and the tanks sloped and add that much more fill? Why are there's these flat plateaus instead of an efficient small cut in the road? Instead of these very broad plateaus.
Well, I asked the same very question that you just did initially, and I would say that the flat space requirement and the coverage over the tanks is an absolute requirement, a functional requirement.
I understand that, but after the tanks, why is the flat, what is that, mulch? Could not some of the soil, excess soil, be pulled against that retaining wall and avoid that retaining wall?
I understand. That flat area is for water operations, maintenance, equipment, future work. They'll be accessing the reservoir from this vault, so they need all this staging space for their equipment, their vehicles, any rig or crane to pull these valves. So it's operational space for the future, including the fire turnaround that's required.
That's 8 feet below your top of reservoir, though, correct?
Correct. So I should mention that the top of the reservoir will not allow heavy equipment on top due to it being on top of the reservoir.
And I don't understand why you need that much space for, and the plateau below the road, I don't understand why it's plateaued, but.
So I understand that upper road, Richard, the tan road in this illustration, is kind of fairly a gentle grade between it and the retaining wall around the reservoir section. But then from that road, it slopes down to a lower retaining wall. So while I don't want to use my words to convince you, but I think the sections that really show the differences.
Okay, and I think it would help, well, the sections might do it, and another tool you might use is, we'll see the sections because I'm concerned about the broadening of the hill and the idea that some of the downslope people would begin to feel less private. And it seems that, well, I'm not in the comments yet.
Board Member Soffin, questions?
No questions.
Board Member Anderson, questions?
Yeah, Is there a reason, I guess, is there a functional reason for such rigid boundaries between because I understand that there's defensible space requirements, but you don't necessarily, it's not clear why it's so, there's the retaining wall that separates these different zones. Is there a design kind of story behind that, or is there a functional?
Are you asking about the retaining wall that surrounds the blue tanks in the illustration?
Well,
Rectangular.
as I look at this plan, are those black lines retaining walls in between each planting zone, or some kind of barrier?
No, but there's the one that kind of adhered somewhat to the property line, the one closest to the property line on the west, the south, and the southwest there.
Can you put the cursor on?
And that it kind of works with the circulation. So they have that access road that kind of wants to kind of traverse most of that site. So that's why the roadway adheres to the perimeter.
But I mean, in terms of the design, from hearing the genesis of the design, it sounds like from the landscape architect, it sounds like there's this kind of layers of fire protection, defensible space that are driving why you planted these out like that. And so I'm just curious, is that beyond that kind of fire protection diagram, is there a functional reason why there are these kind of bands of landscaping as opposed to just a field?
There's different height requirement, but as long as I meet the same height requirement, it doesn't have to be a straight line.
Okay.
It can be, and there's some meandering if you go back to the plan. If you look over on the, and we're looking at that, if you take a look at the left screen, the west, you'll see the meandering planting scheme there.
Okay.
But on the bottom there's a straight edge, and that can change. That could be more meandering right in through there. So we're, as we refine, this is just work in progress.
Okay.
So as we refine it, we can get that to work and be more meandering, more naturalistic, if you prefer.
Okay. And so all those black lines, are they walls then? The thick black separating the planting from the road?
Those are retaining walls.
Those are retaining walls, yeah.
Well, some of them are actually, I believe, concrete gutters, drainage gutters.
Okay. So I'm understanding this is a terraced site, correct?
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. In fact, if you go back to the three-dimensional view, you can see in that, that's a great exhibit right there, because that does show the work area below the reservoir pad, which in a way helps address your concern, Richard, because that is a literal terracing rather than filling material up. There's no material there, but they do need that open space. I even recommended plantings, but it was not kind of accepted.
Okay, that's my only question.
Okay, I had a couple of follow-up questions. If we can go to the site plan, just any site plan, was there consideration to rotate the buildings to the east, so they're not as visible from the?
When you look in the entry drive?
Yeah, even just rotating one, if they could just rotate, 90 degrees to the east. Was there any consideration for that?
Over this way.
No, east.
This way.
Yeah.
There might have been in the past. This is a 10-foot retaining wall, so this is currently a hillside. So rotating them more east would just make them closer to the homes. And
rotate them in front of the retaining wall?
Oh, and close off this turnaround area?
Or
No.
just when you look in the entry road, you don't see right into
Like
the
you
proposed
take the
building.
boxes like this and you go like that?
Yeah.
We could consider that.
Okay. And then the next question is, why is the entire reservoir covered in gravel? Like, can that be planting or not?
If you look at the fire code, in this zone, structures, you cannot have green roofs on them.
You can't have green roofs.
They're prohibited.
Okay. Would you consider a darker gravel?
Sure.
Yes, we haven't designed that material yet.
Yeah.
Material, color board, palette.
That's unfortunate. Okay. Any follow-up questions?
Yes, Chair Anderson. If you can clarify, I asked previously about paving materials. I can understand what's asphalt and what's permeated brick, but what is the area? It looks like there's the memory of the former tank or in the large rectangle, and is that retained and then filled in with gravel around the new tanks? I'm wondering, what is all that gray area and why?
That will just be fill, so the tanks will just be buried in the native fill.
Is the old reservoir walls the new retaining walls around those tanks?
The existing reservoir will be completely demolished and removed.
So why the big rectangle around the tanks?
For the terracing, unless you have anything to add.
Yeah, okay, so again, you know, you're helping me with my questions when I got involved in the project. And one of the questions that is being generated is, well, can there be some freedom to that? They need to bury the periphery around the tanks in some kind of fill and gravel fill. But does it need to be a simple rectangle like on the illustration? And that's a question mark. But again, I think we're grappling with, if this is not visible and it's a cost issue, functionally, how much should the function drive the solution versus the aesthetics? Because we're up here looking at the aesthetics from a vantage point which might not ever be visible. That's the answer. But we can discuss that and look at it. If softening is meaningful and it can be done, we will certainly consider that as we come back to you with further iterations.
Thank you.
So is it functional then, the rectangular around the, or is it just because it's already there?
We can reconsider the rectangle, but the rectangle is probably just the most cost-effective way to have a retaining wall around the existing reservoirs without compromising like the concrete integrity of those reservoirs. They're 30 feet deep and 200 feet wide.
Like a question from a design perspective, one would not want to come forward with a long, expansive retaining wall like shown in the plan view here. And I would suggest, working with the team, that we consider crenellations, articulations, breakup of that long linear length. It's something a design board typically would look at and ask for. But the pushback is, well, that costs more money. Can you see it? Will it make a difference? And that's kind of the dynamic that we're dealing with in trying to come forward with a solution that you guys will, as a board, will feel comfortable with. So another question that comes out of that is like Commissioner Six was suggesting we do a red tile roof on those structures. And I even raised the question is, how regressive in the landscape should those structures be? Should they be white, traditional Santa Barbara structures with clay tile roofs that stand out? Or should it be dark earth tone colors and disappear them into that landscape? So that's the kind of feedback we were hoping for. And again, I think we can do a better job when we return is really giving you like what the visual impacts of this proposal are from any vantage point. You know, our feeling to date and for this presentation was really the only visual access that's meaningful is up the access road. And then, of course, concerns for neighbors' yard, but mostly they're looking at some degree of hillside, and that's what we want to kind of illustrate carefully so that you can make that judgment.
Okay, any other questions? Let's go into comments. So it's just a pre-conceptual hearing, so we will not be making a motion. So you can make your comments and they can write them down. And if you have something to discuss with the board, you can say under discussion. So who would like to start? Okay, go ahead.
I'll start. Thank you, Chair Anderson. I would reiterate your question about consider locating the buildings out of the line of sight from the street view, and this is regards to public safety as my next comment. You also might consider moving that gate closer out to the street. I realize it's located now so you can pull off the street, but for those two safety reasons, keeping vehicles out of that driveway as much as possible. I appreciate the comment about using natives as much as possible, but many natives are as much of a fire hazard as anything in their off-season. I saw a conflicting plant, what was it? Oh, the brachychiton, which I very much like, but we both know it's not a native. So that it could be used for some ornamental purpose. But I think the building should reflect the Santa Barbara and the neighborhood character as much as possible in your considerations in materials and expression. Let's see. And then I do think you could reduce the plan, to my mind, should have more biomorphic forms as the round containers do. I would eliminate the square corners, and you can argue it's a savings, but they might be chamfered at 45 degrees, just some way to reduce that impact as much as possible and have it much more naturalistic expression. Thank you.
Board Member Six?
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. The only reason I would be concerned with the geometry is whether the geometry is imposing or threatening some views from the down-slope neighbors. And if these retaining walls are at the corners are beginning to be more apparent, then I would be concerned. So I think that with your next presentation, you should very carefully convince us that the broadening of the hill and the sharp corners and the new, more out of the center of the site retaining walls are not going to be seen at all from the neighbors. So I think that is something that I need to really be convinced on. And if it's convincing, I don't really then let the geometry follow the function. And I also would like to see very careful sight lines and photo documents of how the La Cresta Drive backyards are affected, and whether there's this thin slice between ocean views and, having, an acre of gravel in back of you from your back view windows. I agree with the comments about the service buildings also. Yeah, I think that's it.
Board Member Soffren?
I think it would be helpful when you come back to sort of have maybe like a breakdown of sort of what are the boss controls of function? Because I think that this should absolutely be approached by function over form, considering it's supplying 70% of the water to the city. And I feel less, some of the comments by other board members, I agree with a lot of them, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to impede 100 years of maintenance and care for such an important asset for the city and the community. So I think maybe it would be helpful with the next presentation to really come in with the hard line rules from, the service providers who are going to need this, so we can better understand and say, this is why this is, and we can't vary on that. I think that would make it easier for us to maybe direct and understand, like, what can we have an influence on. And I do think that form is important because it will be here for 100 years, but I think function should dictate everything first.
Board Member Anderson?
Looking at the landscape plan here and reflecting on the design of this, I think from my perspective, it could do a better job of being a little bit less like a diagram and a little bit less faithful to these kind of zones of fire defensible plantings, and attempt more to blend with the surrounding site so that it doesn't look so much kind of like a bird's eye as you travel across the landscape and you see a golf course all of a sudden and it seems so out of place. So I think that the landscape design should attempt to mediate better with the existing context and the existing landscape, and not be such a hard and jarring site. And also in terms of the geometry, I think the geometry should be softened a lot, and the plantings should maybe do more to provide a resource to the surrounding neighbors in terms of visibility or even wildlife, and that should inform the design a little bit more than it seems to currently. It seems like the design currently is very much about protecting this infrastructural asset without regard to the surrounding neighborhood. And otherwise, I think in the next one we should see some site sections with the existing site dashed to show how much this thing, how exactly it's changed from the existing site. So I would hope to see at least 2 site sections, and maybe some improved landscape plans so that it's not so ambiguous what exactly the black line is, whether it's a retaining wall or a gutter. Thanks.
May I add, there's already some sections, but they're the crazy engineers sections where there's, it's like this and like that. So the section should be,
Scale or architecture.
accurate and include, the affected.
And vegetation.
And vegetation of the affected residences in 1-to-1 scale.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of the comments made, and I think the applicant knows how this project could be sensitive to all the neighbors involved, and I definitely would request the site sections, the important views from the neighbors, what they'll see. I would consider rotating the buildings out of direct line of sight from the entry. If they are viewed, I'd say full Santa Barbara style. If they're not viewed, I think it's up for your interpretation at that point, in my opinion. I also agree with softening the edges of the landscape and make it more meandering as kind of described. It'll be important to really talk about how the edges of the property interact with our neighbors. And I still don't understand how it's considered a green roof if it's a tank buried, but that is beyond me. And if you go with a metal roof, make sure it's matte.
Yes.
Okay, those are my comments.
Can I add one more thing? As a suggestion to the applicant, you might want to take photographs from the rim of the existing reservoir, looking out to see what roofs or windows you capture of the surrounding neighborhoods.
Yeah.
We'll return with some pretty good photo documentation so you guys get good
Yeah.
perspective.
And like, as mentioned, existing and proposed, like, the existing outline on this site plan would have been helpful, just like just so we would know, but, okay, thank you.
I'll jump in with one other comment. You might consider meandering that entry road to restrict a full straight view into the site.
I think that's pinched by property line issues, so.
May very well be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh. Was there another public comment?
No.
Okay.
And I might just say it now. I think if you want to, he was offering there's views from his house that could be.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe for the applicant team.
My house has the best views of anybody.
Okay.
Anybody surrounding the whole thing. And you can come and just stand on my patio.
So
All
maybe
right, talk to them.
Yeah, talk to the applicant.
We'll be there. We'll
Yeah.
be there.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll stay after the meeting and we'll exchange some
All right,
contact
well,
information.
thank you. We look forward to your full application, and we will adjourn for today's meeting.